At some point, every instruction says the same thing. Please read this carefully. And every American brain replies, I'm not stupid. So the oven wasn't preheated, the medicine was taken twice, the device got unplugged mid-update. And then comes the sentence we all know. I followed the instructions. Be honest. How often do you read half a sentence and let confidence finish the rest? These are 45 moments when Americans didn't misread the instructions. They stopped reading halfway and trusted vibes instead. Fact 1. Preheat the oven didn't feel urgent. A man in his 30s started cooking dinner in his suburban kitchen after a long workday. He skimmed the recipe quickly, confident he'd done this 100 times before. The instructions said to preheat the oven, but he skipped it, assuming the oven would heat up while the food cooked. In his head, this saved time. When the dish came out, it was uneven, burnt on the outside, cold in the middle. He blamed the recipe, not the skipped step. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat the first instruction like a suggestion instead of a requirement? Preheating isn't about heat, it's about timing. The instruction wasn't unclear, it just didn't feel important in the moment. The oven did exactly what it was told. The problem was that he never told it early enough. Fact 2. Once daily didn't feel fast enough. A woman recovering from a minor illness read the medication label in her bathroom one morning. It said, take once daily, but the symptoms didn't fade quickly. By evening, she took another dose, assuming once daily was a recommendation, not a limit. The next day, side effects appeared. She was confused. She followed the instructions, didn't she? Ask yourself this: how often do you reinterpret rules when results feel slow? The label wasn't written for comfort, it was written for safety. Once daily doesn't mean as needed, it means this much, no more. The medication worked as designed. The misunderstanding came from impatience, not poor wording. Instructions don't adjust themselves to urgency. They stay literal while confidence fills in the gaps. Fact 3. Do not unplug looked optional. A man setting up a new router in his apartment skimmed the setup guide on his phone. During a firmware update, the screen warned, do not unplug. The update seemed frozen, so he unplugged it anyway to restart faster. The router never came back online. He blamed faulty hardware. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume a warning is just legal protection? Do not unplug wasn't advice, it was a boundary. The system wasn't slow, it was busy. Instructions often exist because someone already tested the failure. The router didn't break randomly, it followed physics. The warning wasn't dramatic, it was accurate. The mistake wasn't misreading, it was deciding the rule didn't apply this time. Fact 4. Microwave safe didn't mean oven safe. A college student reheated leftovers in a plastic container labeled microwave safe. Later, he placed the same container in the oven, assuming heat was heat. The plastic warped, melted, and ruined the food. He was surprised. It said safe. Ask yourself this: how often do you stop reading after the part that reassures you? Microwave safe describes one environment, not all of them. Instructions are specific for a reason. The container wasn't defective, the interpretation was lazy. The label didn't lie, it just wasn't asked the right question. Confidence filled in what attention skipped. Fact 5. Let rest for 10 minutes felt like a suggestion. A home cook followed a recipe carefully until the final line: let rest for 10 minutes. Hungry and impatient, he skipped it and cut into the food immediately. Juices spilled out, texture collapsed, flavor disappeared. He wondered why the dish didn't look like the photo. Ask yourself this: how often do you ignore the last instruction because the hard part feels over? Resting isn't decoration, it's chemistry. The instruction wasn't optional, it just didn't look active enough to matter. The food didn't fail, timing did. Instructions don't end when effort ends, they end when results are ready. Fact 6. Thaw before cooking felt optional. A man preparing dinner in his apartment pulled a frozen chicken breast straight from the freezer and put it in the pan. The instructions said to thaw before cooking, but he assumed heat would handle it. The outside burned while the inside stayed raw. He turned up the temperature, making it worse. Ask yourself this: How often do you skip preparation steps because they don't feel productive? Thawing isn't about convenience, it's about physics. Heat moves slowly through ice. The instructions didn't fail to explain that. They assumed you'd respect it. The mistake wasn't misunderstanding the words, it was believing time could be skipped without consequences. Fact 7. External use only was read too late. A woman used a topical pain relief cream after a long workout. She skimmed the label quickly, focusing on the promised relief. Later, she applied it to a sensitive area it was never meant for. The burning sensation arrived immediately. Ask yourself this: how often do you read warnings after something goes wrong? External use only isn't vague, it's literal. Instructions don't negotiate with assumptions. They wait quietly while confidence experiments. The pain wasn't unexpected, it was scheduled. Fact 8. Hold reset for 10 seconds meant exactly that. A man troubleshooting his phone held the reset button for a full minute, thinking longer meant stronger. The device wiped itself completely. He lost photos, contacts, and settings. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume more effort equals better results? 10 seconds wasn't a suggestion, it was a threshold. The system did exactly what it was programmed to do. The mistake wasn't technical, it was emotional. Panic replacing reading. Fact 9. With food was ignored because he was busy. A man took medication first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. The label clearly said take with food, but breakfast felt optional. Minutes later, nausea hit. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat bodily instructions like fine print? The medicine didn't malfunction, it followed chemistry. Instructions don't adjust to schedules, they assume cooperation. Fact 10. Do not over-tighten was seen as cautionary. A homeowner assembling furniture tightened screws as hard as possible to make it extra secure. The wood cracked. The structure weakened. Ask yourself this: how often do you think force improves precision? Do not over-tighten exists because materials have limits. The instructions weren't timid, they were accurate. The damage came from confidence, not confusion. Fact 11. Microwave for 3 minutes meant all at once. A college student reheating soup in a dorm kitchen read, "Microwave for 3 minutes," and assumed it didn't matter how. He split the time into short bursts, opening the door repeatedly to check. The soup stayed cold in the middle and boiling on the edges. Frustrated, he microwaved it longer and burned the container. Ask yourself this: how often do you change a process midway and blame the result? The instruction wasn't flexible. Continuous heating was part of the method. Microwaves distribute energy unevenly, and interruption resets the process. The soup didn't fail, the method did. Instructions often assume patience, not improvisation. The mistake wasn't reading wrong words, it was believing personal control improves engineered systems. Fact 12. Do not stack looked like a suggestion. A warehouse worker moving boxes onto a dolly noticed a label that said, "Do not stack." He stacked them anyway, confident he could balance the load. For a moment, it worked. Then the boxes shifted, fell, and cracked open. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume warnings are written for careless people, not you? Do not stack isn't about skill, it's about physics and center of gravity. The instruction wasn't pessimistic, it was preventative. The collapse didn't come from clumsiness, it came from ignoring limits already measured by someone else. Instructions exist because outcomes are predictable, even when confidence insists otherwise. Fact 13. Wash before wearing didn't feel necessary. A woman bought a new shirt and wore it straight out of the package. The tag said, "Wash before wearing," but it looked clean. After a few hours, skin irritation appeared. Ask yourself this: how often do you skip safety steps because something looks fine? Manufacturing chemicals aren't visible. The instruction wasn't about cleanliness, it was about residue. The shirt didn't malfunction, the body reacted exactly as expected. Instructions aren't written for appearances, they're written for things you can't see. Ignoring them doesn't make them less real. Fact 14. Do not use while sleeping was taken lightly. A man used a heated massage device late at night. The warning said do not use while sleeping, but he planned to stay awake. He didn't. He woke up to skin irritation and discomfort. Ask yourself this: how often do you trust future alertness more than current fatigue? The instruction wasn't dramatic. It assumed reality. People fall asleep. The device worked as designed. The problem was assuming self-control would override biology. Instructions aren't personal challenges. They're statistical truths. Fact 15. Final submission was clicked too fast. A job applicant filled out an online application late at night. The page warned that final submission cannot be edited. He clicked submit quickly, planning to fix mistakes later. He couldn't. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume systems allow do-overs because people do? The instruction wasn't hidden, it was ignored. Digital systems don't interpret intention, they execute commands. The mistake wasn't technical, it was assuming flexibility where none existed. Fact 16. Keep refrigerated was treated like a preference. A man grabbed a bottle of probiotics from a pharmacy in suburban Florida and tossed it into his car's glove box. The label clearly said keep refrigerated, but he assumed that was only for maximum freshness. A week later, he took it and wondered why it did nothing. The pawn shop-style reality check arrived in the form of chemistry. Heat kills living cultures. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat storage instructions like polite suggestions? Keep refrigerated isn't about comfort. It's about keeping the product alive long enough to work. The bottle didn't become fake. It became pointless. Instructions aren't written to annoy you. They're written because the world doesn't preserve your purchase just because you meant well. Fact 17. Stir frequently was read as eventually. A busy parent making boxed mac and cheese in a cramped kitchen read stir frequently and interpreted it as stir when you remember. They walked away to answer a call, then returned to find the bottom scorched and the sauce separated. The instructions weren't poetic, they were literal. Frequent stirring prevents burning and keeps the mixture emulsified. Ask yourself this: how often do you convert specific words into vibes? Frequently is a time pattern, not a personality trait. The stove didn't betray them. The physics stayed loyal to heat and neglect. The funniest part is the complaint that followed. This brand always burns. No, this brand assumes you'll be present. Instructions are basically the product admitting, in writing, that it can't survive autopilot. Fact 18. Do not mix was read as probably fine. A woman cleaning her bathroom in a small apartment in New Jersey used bleach, then reached for another cleaner that smelled stronger. The label warned not to mix products, but she assumed it was generic legal caution. Within minutes, fumes irritated her eyes and throat, and she had to air out the room in panic. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat chemical warnings like customer service guidelines? Do not mix isn't a suggestion to be careful. It's a boundary drawn by reactions that do not care about confidence. The instructions were clear. The brain simply upgraded itself to chemist for 5 minutes. Reality corrected the promotion immediately. Labels don't exist to scare you. They exist because someone already tried it. Fact 19. Allow to cool before opening was ignored. A man microwaved a sealed meal cup in his office break room, then peeled back the lid immediately because he was late for a meeting. The package said to let it cool before opening, but waiting felt optional when hunger was urgent. Steam burst out, splattering hot liquid and leaving him stunned and angry at the bad design. Ask yourself this: how often do you blame the product for following the laws of pressure? Cooling isn't etiquette, it's safety. Heat creates steam, steam expands, and sealed containers don't care about your schedule. The instruction wasn't hidden, it was inconvenient. And inconvenient instructions are the easiest ones to misread as recommendations. Systems don't punish impatience with moral lessons. They punish it with physics, immediately. Fact 20. Install batteries correctly was assumed obvious. A man setting up a TV remote in a hotel room slid in the batteries quickly without checking the diagram. The remote didn't work, so he pressed harder, tapped it, and blamed the batteries. Only later did he notice one battery was reversed. Ask yourself this: how often do you skip the obvious step and then escalate effort instead of checking direction? Instructions about polarity exist because the human brain loves autopilot, especially when the task feels too simple to deserve attention. The remote wasn't broken, the user was speeding. That's the pattern behind half of modern frustration: doing the wrong thing confidently, then demanding the device respect your confidence. Instructions don't care how obvious you think something is. They care whether you did it. Fact 21. Use only as directed was treated like fine print. A man dealing with seasonal allergies bought an over-the-counter nasal spray at a pharmacy in Colorado. The label said use only as directed, but relief felt slow, so he used it more often. For a few days, it worked. Then, congestion worsened. He assumed the product was defective. Ask yourself this: how often do you increase dosage when results don't arrive on your timeline? Use only as directed isn't legal decoration. It exists because some medicines rebound when overused. The spray didn't fail. It responded exactly as chemistry predicts. Instructions don't adapt to impatience. They stay literal while the body pays the interest. Fact 22. Do not cover was ignored for comfort. A woman using a heating pad on her lower back at home in Oregon placed a blanket over it to keep the heat in. The pad's label clearly warned, "Do not cover," but warmth felt safer than exposed wires. Minutes later, the pad overheated and shut off permanently. Ask yourself this: how often do you improve safety by doing the opposite of what's written? Covering traps heat. Heat damages components. The instruction wasn't optional. It was physics written in plain language. The pad didn't malfunction. It protected itself. Instructions don't negotiate with comfort. They assume you'll respect limits that were measured long before you showed up. Fact 23. Charge fully before first use was skipped. A man bought a new cordless vacuum and immediately started using it in his apartment in Arizona. The manual said to fully charge before first use, but excitement beat patience. The battery drained quickly and never reached full capacity again. He blamed cheap manufacturing. Ask yourself this: how often do you rush setup and blame performance later? Initial charging cycles calibrate batteries. Skipping them permanently reduces lifespan. The vacuum worked as designed. The user shortened its future. Instructions aren't ceremonial. They're part of the product. Ignoring them doesn't save time. It borrows it at interest. Fact 24. Do not double up was misunderstood. A woman organizing vitamins in her kitchen read that she had missed a dose the previous day. She doubled the next one to catch up, assuming balance mattered more than timing. Stomach discomfort followed. Ask yourself this: how often do you apply math where biology is involved? Do not double up exists because the body processes intake over time, not averages. The instruction wasn't vague, it was preventative. Systems don't reward corrections made too late. They enforce rules continuously, even when you're trying to help yourself. Fact 25. Allow 24 hours to set was rushed. A homeowner repairing a loose tile in his bathroom used adhesive that instructed him to allow 24 hours to set. He stepped on it after a few hours, assuming mostly dry was good enough. The tile shifted and cracked. He blamed the adhesive brand. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat waiting as wasted time? Curing isn't about dryness, it's about bonding. The instruction wasn't conservative, it was exact. Materials don't respond to optimism, they respond to time. Instructions are timelines, not suggestions. Fact 26. Do not remove safety seal was treated like packaging. A man bought a bottle of cleaning concentrate at a hardware store in Ohio and assumed the inner safety seal was just annoying packaging. The label said not to remove it until the bottle was upright and ready, but he peeled it off in the car. The liquid leaked into the bag, then onto the seat, and the smell became the real lesson. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat safety steps as obstacles instead of design? Seals exist because liquids follow gravity, not intentions. The instructions weren't complicated. They were trying to prevent the exact thing that happened. The product didn't misbehave. It performed perfectly. The brain simply promoted itself to experienced and skipped the boring part. Systems don't punish arrogance with drama. They punish it with cleanup. Fact 27. Read both sides was ignored. A voter filling out a local mail-in form at his kitchen table in Michigan read the front page carefully, then signed and sealed it. The form clearly instructed him to complete a second section on the back. He didn't see it because he didn't flip the paper. Weeks later, the application was rejected as incomplete. He swore he followed every instruction. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume the information ends where your attention ends? Read both sides isn't a polite suggestion. It's a warning that your confidence will stop early. The form didn't hide anything. The system simply refused to fix what he refused to check. Paperwork is brutal that way. It doesn't care that you tried. It only cares that you finished. Fact 28. Do not use on wet hair was taken lightly. A woman bought a hairstyling tool in California and skimmed the safety label. It warned not to use on wet hair, but she assumed damp was fine because she was in a hurry. The moment the tool touched her hair, it hissed and pulled. The result was frizz, damage, and a smell that made the instructions suddenly feel very personal. Ask yourself this: how often do you redefine words like wet when time is tight? The warning isn't about being picky. It's about heat and moisture turning into steam, and steam doesn't negotiate. The tool wasn't defective. The hair wasn't cursed. The system worked exactly as physics intended. The only variable was impatience pretending it was efficiency. Fact 29. Tighten until snug became crank it. A man assembling a bike rack in his garage in Texas read, "Tighten until snug," and interpreted it as, "Tighten until nothing moves ever again." He over-torqued the bolts, stripped the threads, and cracked a plastic bracket. When the rack wobbled later, he blamed the manufacturer. Ask yourself this: how often do you confuse force with security? Snug is a measured condition, not a personality. Instructions use softer words because materials have limits, even when your confidence doesn't. The rack didn't fail because it was cheap. It failed because the user treated a guideline like a challenge. Systems don't reward intensity, they reward accuracy. And accuracy usually looks boring, right up until you break something by being enthusiastic. Fact 30. Do not reply to this email was replied to. A new employee onboarding remotely in Washington received an automated HR email with bold text: "Do not reply to this email." He replied anyway with urgent questions, assuming someone would see it because it's an email. Days passed. No response. Deadlines approached. He got frustrated and blamed HR for ignoring him. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat a system message like a person? Automation doesn't feel guilt. It doesn't forward your panic. It just sits there, faithfully doing nothing. The instruction wasn't rude. It was literally describing reality. The mistake wasn't that he asked questions. It's that he asked them into a void and expected empathy to route the message. Systems don't correct your assumptions. They wait for you to learn them the hard way. Fact 31. Do not block ventilation was ignored for aesthetics. A man rearranging his living room in North Carolina placed a bookshelf directly in front of an air vent to make the space look cleaner. The manual for the heater clearly warned not to block ventilation, but airflow felt abstract compared to furniture placement. Weeks later, the room stayed cold while the unit overheated and shut itself down repeatedly. He blamed poor design. Ask yourself this: how often do you prioritize how something looks over how it works? Ventilation isn't about comfort. It's about heat needing somewhere to go. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was protecting itself from misuse. Instructions about airflow exist because air obeys physics, not interior design preferences. The heater didn't fail the room. The room failed to let the heater breathe. Systems don't adapt to aesthetics. They wait until you notice the consequences. Fact 32. For indoor use only was read optimistically. A homeowner in Arizona set up a small extension cord on his patio for a quick outdoor project. The packaging clearly stated for indoor use only, but the weather looked dry and harmless. After a short rainstorm, the cord shorted out and damaged the connected equipment. He complained about cheap materials. Ask yourself this: how often do you read restrictions as worst-case scenarios instead of boundaries? Indoor use only isn't about optimism. It's about insulation, moisture, and exposure. The cord didn't suddenly become fragile. It was never designed for that environment. Instructions aren't pessimistic guesses. They're limits based on testing conditions. The mistake wasn't misreading words. It was assuming the rules bend for convenience. Nature didn't bend back. Fact 33. Do not refill was treated as wasteful advice. A man refilling a disposable soap cartridge in his kitchen thought he was being resourceful. The label said do not refill, but throwing it away felt irresponsible. Within days, the dispenser leaked constantly and stopped functioning. He blamed poor manufacturing. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat design constraints like corporate greed? Some systems are sealed for pressure control, hygiene, or material limits. Refilling changed how the mechanism worked. The instructions weren't anti-environment, they were mechanical reality. The dispenser didn't betray him. It behaved exactly as expected once altered. Instructions don't prevent creativity, they prevent failure. Ignoring them doesn't make you clever, it makes you the tester they already accounted for. Fact 34. Do not use while driving was rationalized away. A driver in California used a navigation app feature that clearly warned not to interact while driving. He glanced at settings anyway, convinced a few seconds wouldn't matter. He drifted slightly and clipped a curb, damaging a tire. He blamed distraction, not the choice. Ask yourself this: how often do you assume warnings apply to extreme cases, not small moments? Do not use while driving doesn't measure seconds, it measures attention. The app didn't malfunction, the road didn't surprise him. Instructions don't assume you'll lose control completely, they assume partial attention is enough to fail. Systems don't need dramatic mistakes, they only need one moment of confidence. Fact 35. Save before closing was ignored. Once a graphic designer in New York finished a long project late at night and closed the software without saving, trusting autosave to handle it. The program crashed. Hours of work vanished. He blamed outdated software. Ask yourself this: how often do you rely on safety nets you didn't verify? Save before closing isn't nostalgic advice. It's a reminder that automation isn't guaranteed. The system didn't promise to protect everything. The instruction did. Ignoring it wasn't bold. It was hopeful. Systems don't reward hope. They reward compliance with boring habits that prevent regret. And regret always arrives faster than the save button you didn't press. Fact 36. Do not thaw at room temperature was ignored. Overnight. A man preparing for a weekend barbecue in Minnesota left frozen meat on the kitchen counter overnight. The package clearly warned not to thaw at room temperature, but he assumed cold weather made it safe. By morning, the outside felt fine and the inside was soft enough to cook. Hours later, food poisoning symptoms arrived fast and aggressive. The barbecue ended early and the emergency room explained what the label already had. Ask yourself this: how often do you think instructions are overly cautious because you've done it before? The meat didn't suddenly become dangerous. Bacteria followed time and temperature exactly as predicted. The warning wasn't pessimistic, it was microbiology in plain English. Instructions don't adjust to tradition or confidence. They exist because the worst outcome already happened to someone else. Ignoring them doesn't make you experienced, it makes you the next data point. Fact 37. Do not use near water was taken as legal drama. A man mounted a power strip under his bathroom sink to charge devices conveniently. The label clearly said, do not use near water, but everything looked dry. One leaking pipe later, the strip shorted, sparked, and tripped the breaker, filling the room with smoke. Fire services were called. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat warnings like overprotective lawyers instead of physics? Electricity doesn't wait for floods. Moisture spreads quietly and fast. The power strip didn't fail. It behaved exactly as electricity always does. Instructions aren't written for obvious disasters. They're written for boring, predictable ones. The mistake wasn't that water appeared. It's that the system already assumed it would. Fact 38. Wear protective gear was skipped for speed. A man cutting wood in his garage in Georgia ignored the instruction to wear safety goggles. He planned just one quick cut. The blade kicked back, sending debris into his eye. The emergency room visit took longer than the job ever would have. Ask yourself this: how often do you skip protection because the task feels small? Safety instructions aren't scaled by effort, they're scaled by probability. The saw didn't malfunction, the wood didn't rebel. The system worked as expected when flesh entered the equation. Instructions don't accuse you of carelessness, they assume it's coming. Fact 39. Do not microwave this item was challenged. A man reheated food in the container clearly labeled "Do not microwave." He assumed it was fine for a short time. The container melted, releasing fumes and ruining the appliance. The kitchen filled with smoke. Ask yourself this: how often do you test limits just to see if they're real? The label wasn't theoretical. It was material science. The microwave didn't overreact. It applied energy exactly as designed. Instructions don't bluff. They document failure in advance. Fact 40. Disconnect power before servicing was ignored. Once a homeowner tried to fix a ceiling fan in Texas without cutting power, confident he could avoid the wires. He couldn't. The shock knocked him off balance, sending him to the floor. Ask yourself this: how often do you think control beats electricity? Disconnects power isn't advice. It's the only condition under which the task is safe. The system didn't attack him. It followed rules that don't care about confidence. Instructions aren't polite, they're binary, either followed or enforced. Fact 41. Do not exceed weight limit was treated as a challenge. A man helping friends move into a second-floor apartment in Illinois loaded a rental dolly far beyond its stated weight limit. The label was clear, but the boxes fit, and lifting twice felt inefficient. Halfway up the stairs, the dolly frame bent, snapped, and sent boxes tumbling down. One foot got caught. An ambulance finished the move. Ask yourself this: how often do you treat limits like conservative estimates instead of tested boundaries? Weight limits aren't suggestions. They're failure points measured in advance. The dolly didn't betray him. It performed exactly to specification. Instructions don't negotiate with motivation. They assume gravity will win eventually, because it always does. Fact 42. Do not remove guard was ignored for visibility. A man using a table saw in his garage in Wisconsin removed the safety guard to see better. The manual warned against it, but the guard felt like an obstacle between him and efficiency. During a cut, the wood kicked back violently. Fingers narrowly avoided worse damage, but the injury still required surgery. Ask yourself this: how often do you remove safety because it slows you down? Guards exist because visibility isn't the only risk. Momentum is. The saw didn't malfunction. The guard was removed, so physics took over. Instructions aren't written for careful people. They're written for moments when attention slips for half a second. Fact 43. Do not leave unattended was ignored briefly. A woman cooking oil on the stove in New York stepped away just for a minute to answer her phone. The packaging warned not to leave heating oil unattended. The oil ignited. The fire spread to cabinets. Firefighters arrived faster than dinner ever would have. Ask yourself this: how often do you compress time when danger is involved? 1 minute is enough. The stove didn't fail. The oil followed temperature. Instructions aren't pessimistic. They're timed to reality, not intention. Systems don't wait for you to finish the call. Fact 44. Use only approved charger was ignored to save time. A man traveling in Nevada used a cheap third-party charger on his laptop despite warnings to use only the approved one. It fit, so it felt harmless. Minutes later, sparks flew, the battery swelled, and the device shut down permanently. He lost files and hardware. Ask yourself this: how often do you trust compatibility by shape alone? Power delivery isn't universal. The instruction wasn't branding, it was engineering. The laptop didn't reject the charger out of spite. It failed because electricity doesn't care about convenience. Instructions exist to prevent silent damage, not dramatic explosions. This time, it did both. Fact 45. Evacuate immediately was read as wait and see. A man in California ignored an evacuation notice during a fast-moving wildfire, believing he had time to watch and decide. Instructions were explicit. He waited. Roads closed. Smoke thickened. He escaped hours later with nothing. Ask yourself this: how often do you delay action because instructions feel premature? Evacuation orders aren't forecasts, they're deadlines. The system didn't overreact. It acted on probabilities you can't see. Instructions don't care about optimism. They care about survival windows. Miss them, and consequences stop being theoretical. None of these moments started with stupidity. They started with confidence. Every person here believed they understood enough. Enough to skip a step. Enough to bend a warning. Enough to save time. And every system responded the same way. Silently. Instantly. Without emotion. The instructions didn't change. Physics didn't negotiate. Chemistry didn't slow down. Electricity didn't forgive. What failed wasn't intelligence, it was attention. Most instructions are written because the failure already happened once. They're not guesses. They're documentation of someone else's worst day. But when we read them, we translate them into suggestions. We assume exceptions. We trust our instincts over tested limits. And that's the pattern. Not misreading, not ignorance, but autopilot, confidence filling in the blanks where reading stopped. These weren't extreme cases. They were normal days that turned expensive, painful, or dangerous because one sentence didn't feel urgent. Instructions don't exist to control you. They exist to protect you from outcomes that don't care how reasonable you felt. The brain wants shortcuts. The world enforces rules. And every time those two meet, reality wins. Here's the part nobody likes admitting. Most of these disasters didn't happen because the instructions were confusing. They happened because the instructions were boring. They didn't feel urgent. They didn't feel personal. They didn't feel like they applied this time. And that's how confidence sneaks in. We skim. We assume. We fill in the gaps with experience, vibes, or "I've done this before." But instructions aren't written for your best day. They're written for the one moment when timing is off, attention slips, or impatience takes over. They don't exist to insult your intelligence. They exist because reality is consistent in a way humans aren't. Electricity doesn't care how careful you plan to be. Fire doesn't wait for you to finish a call. Chemistry doesn't slow down because you're in a hurry. And systems don't correct you gently. They just enforce the rules you ignored. That's why warning labels keep getting longer. That's why manuals repeat themselves. That's why "do not" shows up so often. Not because people are stupid, but because confidence is faster than attention. So the real question isn't, why would anyone do that? It's this. Which instruction are you reading right now and silently translating into, "I'll be fine"? Because the instructions will stay exactly where they are. And the moment you stop reading, reality takes over. This has been The Absurdist Files, where mistakes aren't dramatic, consequences aren't personal,